You may be seated. It occurs to me that the landscape of the last several days has been heavily shaped by words. Oaths have been taken, speeches given, thank you, Ken, for that chuckle, executive orders declared, statements posted, fears whispered, protocols emailed, plans drafted. There are a lot of words on the street right now. A lot of words are vying for our attention. Which ones are you listening to? Which ones are stuck in your head? Which ones hurt your heart? Which ones, if any, offer a glimpse of God's kingdom here and to come? Now, we are gathered here presumably because we're trying to follow Jesus, right? Yes, we are. We're looking for that light. And we are to follow Jesus and his way of love and justice in word and in deed. So it's fitting then that today we're spending some time with Jesus on the job in this kickoff phase of his public ministry. Because in the gospel, according to Luke, it all starts with words. Jesus comes to voice. And the first words that he chooses to preach are ones from the prophet Isaiah. Jesus is full of the Spirit of God. He is in his hometown, Sheol. He is among his people, and he's standing in his full authority. And Jesus says, "The Most High has anointed me to bring good news to those who are poor. God has sent me to proclaim liberty to those that are captive, recovery of sight to those who are blind, release to those in prison, to proclaim the year of God's favor." And he sits down. Mic drop. Now this is it, friends. This is like really it. The whole thing. Jesus tells us in just these very few words who he is and literally what he has come to do. This is an epiphany moment, a revealing. Luke shapes his entire gospel around this passage, telling us right from the start, this is Jesus' mission statement. And so if you're gonna follow Jesus, it should be yours. We have in these few but powerful prophetic words the guiding principles of our faith. So if we follow Jesus, then our primary tasks are one of compassion and of justice. If we follow Jesus, then the lives and the needs of the poor, the oppressed, the captive, and the hurting must be paramount to us. Now, we can also learn a lot by paying attention to what Jesus does not choose to preach about in that first recorded sermon. He does not pontificate on what righteousness demands. He doesn't give instruction on how to curry favor with God or how to structure our institutions. Does this surprise us? Jesus doesn't offer us a series of rituals to enact or even beliefs to profess. That stuff is obviously not his primary concern. But Jesus also doesn't pull his spiritual punches. So let me be clear about that. He does not go easy on this hometown crowd, keeping them comfortable in the way that things are. His words call in. They declare an age of emancipatory transformation. And he aligns himself right away with folks who need help, with folks who are captive in all sorts of ways. So with courage and conviction, guided by the Spirit, Jesus speaks liberation and love to the impoverished and the oppressed. And this prophetic word is followed by action. Jesus holds these words of Isaiah as sacred. They help ground and guide his life and ministry. So the question is, what words do you hold in your heart that orient your actions, your choices, and that give you direction, especially when the way is unclear? Jesus had his. What are yours? What are ours? Rabbi Abraham Joshua Hessel wrote the book on the prophets, literally, and in it, he explained that the tremendous power of the prophetic word, a word that calls in the realm and the revolution of God to us in the here and now. And he writes this about it: the prophet's word is a scream in the night. While the world is at ease and asleep, the prophet feels the blast from heaven. The prophet faces a coalition of callousness and established authority and undertakes to stop a mighty stream with mere words. The purpose of prophecy, he writes, is to conquer callousness, to change the inner soul, and to revolutionize history. Just a little task. Now, I find these words incredibly helpful right now, because in this swirl of words, how can we ever tell which one is the message of God? In this ideological PR battle for the soul of our nation, how can we tell which is God's word and which is just noise, like this clanging gong? Keeping in mind both Jesus' sermon and Heschel's explanation, we can better discern what's the word. What's the word we need to listen to, and what's the word we need to live by? So take, for example, Monday's program. As some of you know, we gathered at B'nai Jeshurun to watch the inaugural speech together, glutton for punishment though we were. We were there to listen with intention and with purpose. Now, we didn't just absorb absently the words that were uttered, and we didn't just bat them away. Instead, we listened with attunement. We listened for God's still, small voice to be revealed. We listened for the values that are lifted up in Jesus' first sermon. And here's the weird thing. We heard God speaking, not in the words that were spoken, mind you, but in their opposites, in the absences, in our hurting, grieving hearts, in our troubled guts, and in that room where we were gathered. For such a time as this, I think knowing how, literally how to listen for God's word in all that we are hearing is an essential discipline. No matter who is speaking or from what office, we followers of Christ need to listen with our hearts. We need to stay attuned and oriented to who and what was most important to Jesus. So we need to ask ourselves, in whatever it is that we are hearing, how is justice being framed and defined? Who is acknowledged? Who is ignored? Is poverty, inequality, climate justice addressed? Is the leadership that is displayed and described one of compassion and service? Are systemic injustices addressed, or are they perpetrated? Whose absence registers with you? Whose voices are left out? Now, these questions can help clear away some of this chatter, some of the rhetoric, and they can guide us to the prophetic word, that blast from heaven. Because sometimes we know this, sometimes that blast sounds like a whisper. Sometimes it's only heard in our hearts. So I'm thinking of, like many of you, I hope, I'm thinking of this beautiful example that was embodied by Bishop Buddy at the inaugural prayer service. In simple and straightforward speech, she pleaded with the president, asking, "In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared right now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families, some of who fear for their lives." She kept saying, "The people who pick our crops and clean our office buildings and who labor in poultry farms and meat packing plants, who wash the dishes after we eat in restaurants and work the night shifts in hospitals, they may not be citizens or have proper documentation, but they pay taxes and are good neighbors. I ask you to have mercy. Help those who are fleeing war zones and persecution in their own lands to find compassion and welcome here." Now, those words, they exemplify so clearly the foundational principles that are pronounced and proclaimed by Jesus. And what's more, I think this is really important, so I'm taking note myself. What's more, to offer them, Bishop Buddy didn't have to yell, and she didn't have to demean. She didn't rely on fear or abuse at all. With compassion, she pleaded for compassion. In form, in function, in content, she embodied Jesus' word and Jesus' way. Oh, that we could do likewise in whatever sphere of influence we find ourselves in. Going back to Monday's interfaith gathering. After we listened to the inaugural speech and we took notes, lots and lots of notes, we checked in with ourselves and our bodies. We spent some time thinking about our spiritual and our moral and our ethical principles, the ones that we hold dear. And we asked ourselves to put into words what we are now motivated or inspired to orient towards and to fight for in this season. After listening for the prophetic word, we were trying to figure out what that next step into action would be. So we wrote these around the room on chart paper, and then we walked around to see what other people offered up. It was a powerful exercise. It was first important to kind of articulate for ourselves what it is that's guiding us. But then it was also powerful to see other people trying to figure it out themselves. I was deeply moved by the sharing, and I offer some of these statements to you with the hope, the sincere hope that they can guide you in your own discernment, in your own determination for how you will respond to the prophetic word with action. I will not accept the premise that we are at war with the most vulnerable. I will work hard to not break everyone up into us and them. I will remember that joy is in the form of resistance. Right, Peggy? We will struggle not against other people, but against systems of oppression, evil, and power. I will stay gentle and open-hearted. I will remember everyone's humanity. I will not isolate myself, but instead I will connect and rely on community. I will not fall into the trap that there are good people and bad people. I will remember to laugh. I will reframe the southern border as holy ground with pilgrims of faith journeying through. I will remember that I do not have to stomp on someone else in order to see my own value. I will commit to the spiritual discipline so I don't return hate for hate. Friends, it took actual effort, like real effort, to take in the rhetoric of exceptionalism and isolation, hatred and bigotry, and listen beneath and between the words for divine utterances of compassion and justice. But they were there, and who was left out, and the values shown in contrast, the silences were loud when we oriented towards them. And I think that this spiritual practice, it can help us a lot in the days ahead. God is still speaking. So we just need to make sure we're listening.